You're not tired of life. You're tired of fighting a war inside your head that no one else sees. You wake up already bracing for what could go wrong. You rehearse conversations, anticipate problems, build invisible walls. You calculate how to protect yourself from what hasn't even happened yet, and no one notices. Because from the outside you look like someone who has it all together, responsible, organized, calm. But inside, you're screaming for silence, for rest, for release. You keep holding everything together because you were taught to. Because somewhere along the line you came to believe that being strong meant never letting things fall apart, that losing control meant losing yourself, that if you stopped managing, guiding, holding, everything around you would collapse. But what no one told you is that the more you try to control everything, the more you lose control of yourself. The people who rely on you don't see what it costs you to show up every day. They don't see the tight chest, the racing thoughts, the constant pressure you place on your own heart just to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. And the worst part? You don't know how to stop. You wouldn't even know who you are without the pressure. You've confused control with identity. Control became your armor and also your prison. That's why you're exhausted, not because of what life demands, but because of what you demand from yourself. You've built your life like a fortress, but inside you're barely breathing. Every decision has to be perfect. Every outcome has to be predictable. Every part of your life has to be explainable, manageable, measurable. But life doesn't work like that. Life isn't built for constant control, and you weren't built to carry that kind of burden. Napoleon Hill once said that fear is the most subtle and destructive of all human diseases. And what you're dealing with isn't control. It's fear wearing a mask. Fear that if you let go, you'll be abandoned. Fear that if you relax, everything will fall apart. Fear that if you trust the process, you'll be hurt again. But what if I told you that the real damage isn't coming from what might happen, but from what you're doing to avoid it? People say you're strong, but they don't see what it costs you to be the strong one. They don't see the tension in your body at night. They don't hear the thoughts that won't let you sleep. You've made strength your brand, but behind closed doors, you're falling apart quietly. And the most dangerous part? You think this is normal. You've normalized being in a constant state of alert. You've normalized micromanaging your emotions, your environment, your relationships, just to feel safe. But safety that costs you your peace isn't safety. It's control. And control is a lie. A lie that says if you try hard enough, plan deeply enough, anticipate far enough, nothing bad will happen. But life doesn't reward the ones who control. Life rewards the ones who flow, who trust, who are open. If something in this video touched a part of your story, share it in the comments. You never know who else might need to read your words today. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. This is a journey we're meant to walk together. You might be wondering now, if I stop trying to control everything, won't I fall apart? And the answer is, maybe. But maybe that's exactly what you need. Maybe falling apart is the only way to rebuild from a place of truth. Maybe it's not about holding it all together. Maybe it's about finally letting yourself unravel, so the parts of you that are real can emerge. You're not weak for being tired. You're not broken for needing rest. You're not failing because you can't hold it all anymore. You're just human, and humans weren't meant to live like this. They weren't meant to suffer quietly under the weight of expectations. They weren't meant to be machines of performance and perfection. They were meant to feel, to break, to rest, to heal, and to begin again. So if no one told you this before, let me say it now. You don't need to keep performing strength to be worthy of love, of respect, of peace. You don't need to keep proving you're okay just to feel safe. There's more power in surrender than in endless control. There's more peace in softness than in pressure. And there's more truth in your quiet breakdown than in your perfect appearance. This is the part where most people look away, where they scroll, where they click off, because it's too real. Because it touches the places they've been hiding from. But if you're still here, it means you're ready. Ready to hear the truth about what's really happening inside you. About how control isn't saving you, it's suffocating you. And in the next part, we'll explore why the control you thought was your shield has actually become your cage. And more importantly, what happens when you realize you hold the key, and you always have. It's strange how something can look like a shield and still be a prison. You wear control like armor. You think it's protecting you from chaos, from heartbreak, from loss. And at first, it feels like power, like you're finally in charge. You're making the decisions. You're keeping things in order. You're preventing disaster. Until one day, you realize you can't breathe under the weight of your own expectations. And the armor you thought was saving you is what's slowly killing you. No one teaches us how to live without certainty. We're raised to seek answers, to pursue security, to build lives with blueprints and checklists. Society celebrates the planners, the achievers, the "I have everything figured out" people. But here's the hidden truth. The obsession with control is often rooted in fear. Deep, unresolved, unspoken fear. Not of life itself, but of feeling powerless within it. You might not call it fear. You might call it being responsible, being careful, being strategic. But control is just fear wearing a nicer name. And it's seductive. It makes you feel needed, competent, respected. It gives you something to hold when everything else feels uncertain. But over time, that control begins to rot from the inside out. It becomes less about directing your life and more about hiding from it. Napoleon Hill spoke often of how desire, when backed by faith, becomes unstoppable. But when desire is backed by fear, it becomes desperation. And desperation breeds control. Not the kind that makes you a leader, the kind that makes you a prisoner in your own mind. Think about it. How often have you stayed in a relationship, a job, or a situation simply because you felt you couldn't control what would happen if you left? You weren't happy, you weren't growing, but you stayed because staying felt safer than facing the unknown. That's the illusion of control. It doesn't ask you to be honest. It just asks you to stay exactly where you are, no matter how much it costs you. We've romanticized the idea of having it all together. But let me ask you something. Who decided that being emotionally numb, constantly exhausted, and quietly terrified was a symbol of success? When did we agree that never asking for help, never slowing down, and always appearing fine was the mark of strength? You've been praised for how well you manage everything, but no one sees what it takes. The silent panic, the tension in your jaw, the way your mind replays mistakes you haven't even made yet. Control might give you moments of stability, but they come at the cost of inner freedom. And without freedom, there's no room for joy, only performance. You wake up, and your first thought is a to-do list, not a moment to breathe, not a moment to check in with yourself. You're on autopilot, and it's killing your soul. You manage the chaos around you, but no one knows you're barely holding it together behind your eyes. And the saddest part? You think this is just how life is supposed to feel. But life isn't meant to be controlled. It's meant to be lived. And living means letting go. It means allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, to not know. It means trusting that even when you release the grip, things will still move, maybe even better than before. What if I told you that the most powerful people in history weren't the ones who controlled the most, but the ones who knew when to surrender? Napoleon Hill didn't teach people to micromanage their lives. He taught them to master their thoughts, align with purpose, and then trust the process. That's real power. Not forcing, not panicking, but standing still in the middle of uncertainty and not flinching. You've spent years building a life based on predictability, but predictability isn't peace. It's just the absence of surprise. And real peace comes not from control, but from the unshakable belief that no matter what happens, you'll survive it. You'll adapt. You'll rise. There's something deeply human about wanting to steer everything. We crave control because we've been hurt, betrayed, let down. We want to make sure we never feel that way again. But the cost of that protection is our own aliveness. Because when you control your world too tightly, you also control what can enter it. Love, grace, joy, serendipity, all the magic that can't be measured or managed. And maybe that's the real tragedy, that in your effort to protect yourself, you've accidentally shut the door on the very things you were trying to invite in. But here's the twist. If you built this prison, you can also dismantle it. If you created the pattern of control, you can also learn to release it. And no, it doesn't mean chaos. It means clarity. It means trusting yourself so deeply that you no longer need to control every step, because you know you'll find your footing no matter where you land. So I'm asking you now, what would your life look like if you weren't trying to control it all? Who would you become if you allowed yourself to let go? Just a little? What might happen if you replaced control with trust, fear with faith, pressure with presence? These are not easy questions. They're terrifying if you've built your whole identity around control, but they're necessary because somewhere inside you, there's a voice whispering that there's more to life than managing pain, more to success than exhaustion, more to you than control. And in the next part, we'll explore what that more actually feels like, what it looks like to surrender, not in weakness, but in strength, to stop fighting what you can't change, and finally, feel what it's like to be free. Letting go isn't giving up. That's where most people get it wrong. They think surrender means defeat, weakness, passivity. But what if the opposite were true? What if surrender was actually the highest expression of strength, not because you're backing down, but because you finally trust yourself enough to stop forcing things that were never yours to carry? You've been told your whole life to push harder, to fight, to persist. And yes, there's beauty in that kind of resilience, but there's also a cost, because no one tells you what happens when you keep pushing after the season has ended. No one talks about the burnout, the silent breakdown, the moment your soul starts whispering, enough. There's a subtle kind of pain that comes from always trying to control the uncontrollable. You plan, you calculate, you micromanage the future. But no matter how much you prepare, life will always find a way to surprise you. And the more you resist that truth, the more exhausted you become. What part of this message spoke the loudest to you? Let me know in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else feel seen. And if this content helps you grow, don't forget to subscribe. There's more waiting for you right here. Surrender doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You stop holding your breath, waiting for the perfect moment, the flawless outcome, the guarantee that will never come. It means you finally exhale. You accept that some things won't make sense right now, that you won't have all the answers, and that's okay, because growth doesn't need clarity to begin. Think of a river. It doesn't force its way through the mountains. It flows. It adapts. It carves paths where none existed, not through violence, but through consistency and trust in its own movement. That's what surrender looks like. It's not passive. It's deeply active. It's the decision to keep moving even when you don't see the full map. Napoleon Hill understood this better than most. He didn't build his philosophy on brute strength. He built it on faith, not religious dogma, but a deep inner knowing that there is something intelligent working beneath the surface, something that responds to your thoughts, your vibration, your belief. And to tap into that force, you don't need to control it. You need to align with it. And alignment begins with surrender. When you let go of control, you make room for clarity, for intuition, for guidance that doesn't come from logic but from something deeper. Have you ever noticed how the best ideas often arrive when you stop trying to force them? That's not a coincidence. It's what happens when the mind stops shouting and the soul finally gets a chance to speak. But letting go is terrifying at first, because we've tied our worth to our ability to manage everything. We've convinced ourselves that if we don't have our hands on the wheel, everything will crash. But what if that's just fear talking? What if life isn't waiting for you to control it, but for you to trust it? The truth is, some of the most powerful shifts in your life will happen the moment you stop trying to manipulate the timing. Some doors will open only after you stop knocking. Some breakthroughs will only arrive when you're no longer desperate for them to appear. There's a reason why people who've hit rock bottom often become the most peaceful. It's not because life got easier. It's because they stopped pretending they were in control. They released the illusion, and in doing so, they discovered something better than control. Peace, presence, power that doesn't come from force but from flow. This is the energy Napoleon Hill was pointing to when he spoke of definiteness of purpose backed by burning desire and faith. The faith part? That's surrender. It's knowing that your role is to take action, but not to strangle the outcome. It's staying committed to the vision but detached from how or when it arrives. And here's the paradox. The more you release, the more life begins to align. Not because you gave up, but because you finally stepped out of your own way. You stopped blocking the blessings with your need to control every detail. You became available to receive. There's an ancient power in surrender that modern society has forgotten. A wisdom that says you are not the source of everything, but you are connected to it. And when you trust that connection, when you stop fighting the flow, things begin to fall into place in ways your logic could never orchestrate. You've probably felt it before. That moment when you finally gave up on forcing something and suddenly everything began to shift. The relationship healed, the opportunity appeared, the answer came. That wasn't luck. That was alignment. That was surrender doing its silent work. So if you're tired of carrying everything, if your soul is weary from controlling, maybe it's time to try something different. Maybe it's time to lean back, to breathe, to trust that what is meant for you will not pass you by. Not because you chased it, but because you became aligned with it. This isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing what's yours, and letting the rest fall where it may. It's about recognizing that not everything is your battle to fight. Some things require your energy. Others require your release. Wisdom is knowing the difference. And when you begin to live this way, with presence, with trust, with surrender, you'll notice something strange. Life starts to feel lighter, not because the challenges disappear, but because you're no longer fighting them with clenched fists. You're flowing through them. You're dancing with them. You're becoming something stronger than control can ever give you, free. And in the next part, we'll explore exactly what happens when you begin to trust that flow, how life starts responding to your shift in energy, how the invisible begins to move, and how the things you once chased begin to find you instead. Shall we begin? Something happens when you stop trying to control life. At first, it's subtle, like a weight you didn't even know you were carrying begins to loosen. You feel it in your chest, in your breath, in the way your mind stops racing every time the future crosses your thoughts. It's not that life becomes easier, but you become clearer, lighter, and for the first time in a long time you begin to move without dragging your past behind you. When you trust, not because everything is certain, but because you've decided that certainty is not a requirement for peace, you start walking through life with a different kind of power, a quiet one. A power that doesn't scream or demand, but simply knows. And that kind of knowing is magnetic. You start to notice that the things you used to chase begin appearing without the same effort. Not because you've stopped working, but because the energy behind your work has changed. You're no longer operating from desperation. You're not trying to force results to prove your worth. You're moving with alignment, and that changes everything. Napoleon Hill spoke often about the subconscious mind, how it absorbs what you feel, believe, and dwell upon. But what he also understood, though many overlook it, is that your energy speaks louder than your actions. You can be doing all the right things, but if your energy is rooted in fear, nothing flows. It's like trying to sail with your anchor still buried in the ground. Letting go of control releases that anchor. It signals to your subconscious and to the greater intelligence that governs this universe that you're ready to operate from trust rather than trauma. And that shift changes the nature of your desires. You're no longer praying from panic. You're no longer visualizing from scarcity. You're not asking the world to save you. You're moving like someone who already believes they're safe. And ironically, that's when you begin to receive. When you trust, you become open. Open to timing, to redirection, to outcomes you couldn't have imagined. You begin to see that rejection wasn't punishment, it was protection. That the delay wasn't denial, it was preparation. You stop looking at life as something that's happening to you and begin to experience it as something happening for you. This kind of trust isn't naive. It's not passive optimism. It's grounded, mature surrender. It comes from being broken enough to know that control doesn't work, and wise enough to stop trying to make it work. It's the kind of faith that only grows in the dark, when you've exhausted your plans, burned out your strength, and realize that what's left is enough. There's a strange peace that settles in when you reach this place. You begin to notice that your relationships shift, conversations deepen, decisions become clearer. You're not acting from obligation anymore. You're responding from clarity. And in this space, your intuition becomes louder. You don't second guess it like before. You feel it, trust it, and follow it. And often, it leads you exactly where you need to be, even if that place looks nothing like what you once pictured. One of the greatest tragedies is how many people miss their transformation because they won't loosen their grip. They're holding on to timelines, to outcomes, to identities that no longer serve them. They're stuck in a version of themselves that was built around fear, around survival, around performance. But healing begins when you stop asking life to give you what you want and start allowing it to give you what you need. And that starts with trust. Trust doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you've stopped trying to control through anxiety. It means you've stopped micromanaging your blessings. It means you're no longer asking for proof before you believe. You're moving as if you're already held, already guided, already worthy. And the truth is, you are. This is not something the world teaches you. In fact, the world teaches you the opposite. Hustle, chase, prove, grind, control your path, build your empire, never stop. But that kind of constant striving will drain your soul. It will rob you of joy. It will leave you empty, even if you succeed. Because real success isn't just about results, it's about inner state. It's about the kind of person you become in the process. Do you have peace? Do you trust the journey? Can you enjoy the moment, even if the outcome isn't guaranteed? These are the real measures. These are the foundations of a life that isn't just productive, but powerful. There will always be things you can't control. That's not a flaw in the system. It's the design. Because life isn't here to be tamed. It's here to teach you, to grow you, to wake you up. And sometimes the only way it can do that is by letting you fall apart just enough to realize that you don't need to have it all together. You just need to stay open. Open to the possibility that letting go isn't the end. It's the beginning. That what feels like falling is actually flight. That what looks like chaos may be construction. And that the moment you stop demanding certainty is the moment you make room for real magic to happen. So pause for a second. Ask yourself, what are you gripping so tightly right now? What story are you telling yourself about how things must go? What if, just for today, you laid that down? Not forever, just for a moment, just long enough to breathe again, to let the tension melt, to feel what it's like to move from trust, not tension. And as we move into the final part, we'll explore the profound transformation that happens when you finally let go. Not just in theory, but in practice. What it looks like, what it feels like, and how your entire life begins to realign, quietly, powerfully, around the version of you that no longer needs to control to feel safe, because that version of you is free. There comes a moment, subtle, unannounced, when you realize that you no longer need to fight so hard, not because the battle is over, but because you've changed. You're not the same person who started this journey. Somewhere along the way, in between the tears and the silence, the shattered hopes and unexpected breakthroughs, you became someone else, someone quieter, someone deeper, someone stronger. The old you needed answers. The old you needed certainty. The old you needed to control every detail, every step, every outcome. But this new version doesn't. Not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. You no longer crave the illusion of control because you've tasted the peace that comes with surrender. You've seen how forcing things drains your spirit, how clinging only leads to pain. And in letting go, slowly, painfully, honestly, you discovered that nothing essential was ever lost. What was real stayed. What was true found its way back. And what left was never yours to begin with. You started this path thinking you needed to fix everything. Your life, your relationships, your future. But maybe what you really needed was to feel everything. To face the wounds you spent years hiding. To stop numbing yourself with busyness and noise. To finally sit in the quiet and hear what your soul was trying to say. You've made it this far because something here resonated. Tell me which moment stood out the most in the comments. And if you felt this was more than just a video, if it felt like a mirror, make sure to subscribe. We're just getting started. And what it said was this: you don't have to control everything to be okay. You don't have to know the ending to trust the process. You don't have to force what's meant for you. It's not about giving up. It's about rising up from a deeper place, from trust, not tension, from love, not fear, from alignment, not desperation. Napoleon Hill taught us that thought, when fused with emotion, becomes power. But what most forget is that fear is also a powerful emotion. And when your thoughts are soaked in fear, they manifest struggle, resistance, pain. So if you want a new life, you need a new energy, a new way of thinking, a new way of believing. You don't create that through force, you create it through surrender. And yes, that will feel terrifying at first, like stepping off a cliff without wings. But that's the test. That's the initiation. Because life isn't waiting for the perfect version of you. It's waiting for the real one. The one who's willing to show up broken, uncertain, raw, honest. That's where the power lives. And as you live from that space, not sometimes but consistently, you begin to notice small miracles, conversations that shift, opportunities that appear, emotions that no longer own you. You wake up one day and realize you're not trying to survive anymore. You're living, really living, not in fear, not in performance, but in freedom. And you'll still stumble, you'll still forget, you'll still want to control. That's part of being human. But now, you'll remember faster, forgive quicker, return sooner. You'll find peace, not in the absence of storms, but in your ability to stay grounded through them. So if no one told you this lately, let me be the first. You're doing better than you think. You're healing in ways you can't yet see. You're more powerful than you give yourself credit for. And life still has more for you. More joy, more meaning, more growth. But it's waiting on the other side of letting go, the other side of trust, the other side of everything you once feared would break you, but actually built you. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. Thank you for giving yourself the gift of this space, of this moment. Not everyone makes it here, but you did, and that says something about your soul. If this video touched something deep inside you, I invite you to share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it, needs to know they're not alone. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, because this space is more than just words. It's a place for souls like yours, searching, growing, awakening. The next video is waiting for you on the screen right now, and in it we'll go even deeper into the invisible patterns that shape your reality and how you can finally break free from them. You're not just watching a video, you're remembering who you are. I'll see you there.